Well, in his presentation of the 2019 budget to Parliament, the Finance Minister mentioned plans to address infrastructure challenges in the education sector. Let me just bring you that highlight from the budget. So it says government has presented to Parliament a proposal to secure up to $1.5 billion long-term financing for GET Fund on the back of a portion of VAT receivables, which will be issued in 3 tranches of $500 million. This will be used for critical education infrastructure, especially to complete the numerous uncompleted buildings in secondary and tertiary institutions across or around the country. Still on the budget, William Kofi Owusu Dimitia is a tax consultant and policy analyst. He's also with Alina Chen Associates. And we're just going to be basically getting some understanding on the whole issue of tax. We heard the finance minister speak a lot about that. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
I saw you nodding your head when we read the VAT receivables. The minister saying that they're going to get some money from there, and also he spoke about the fact that they had listened to the people as government and scrapped the 35% on income tax of earners of 10,000 and above, moved it to 20,000, and that will be at 30%. For many people, the big deal is, but this doesn't affect us. Generally looking at the budget, would you say that there has been a reduction in taxes?
Well, thank you. I think the first thing I need to say is it's commendable government did not introduce new taxes in the budget. I have always maintained that we need to be able to look at tax compliance, the existing tax law. The question should be, how well are we getting people to comply? If we get an appreciable level of compliance, then we can look at new tax measures. So I think that is commendable. Now, on the issue of the income tax, the reality is that for most working class Ghanaians, except those in the upper middle income, the reduction or the supposed takeaway of the 35% does not really affect them. So if you are not earning 10,000, taxable income of 10,000 Ghana cedis a month, you weren't paying tax at 35%. Now, the proposal in the budget was that they were going to realign the various income tax bands. So there's a portion of income that is not taxed, what we call the tax-free threshold. Government says they are going to increase it to reflect the minimum wage. Now, in times past, when that was done, the various bands after that, the 5% band, the 10% band, the 17.5% band, the 25% band, were collapsed. So effectively, everybody was paying a little bit more. So we want to know this time around what the collapse would look like, or what the realignment of the bands will look like. If we are going to increase the tax-free threshold, it doesn't necessarily mean we should reduce the amounts that fall into the other categories. Because when we do that, a majority of people will pay a little bit more.
Okay.
So we'll have to wait and see what government brings by way of the amendment of the graduated tax table in the first schedule to the income tax.
It's interesting that you mention the issue of minimum wage. We'll be talking a lot more about that, but let's listen to what the minister said with regards to taxation in the budget.
Government will broaden the tax net by simplifying payment of taxes through different routes under the guidance of GRA, including the elimination of paying for government services with cash, requiring that citizens show they attend before accessing social services like free healthcare, free secondary school education, and beginning in September of this year. Other services like vehicle licensing and registration, passport services, banking services, as well as mobile money services, giving all persons and entities, regardless of resident status, an opportunity to honor their moral tax obligations that justify their access to public goods. We will further accompany these with some reliefs in 2019. Tax relief. Review of the income tax ban. Government in the mid-year review introduced an additional personal income tax ban of 10,000 Ghana cedis and above per month at a rate of 35%. We have listened to the feedback from the public and come to the conclusion that some relief from this tax measure in the middle class is justified. Accordingly, government proposes to review this band to impact monthly income above 20,000. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, order. Mr. Speaker, order. Mr. Speaker, members, order. Mr. Speaker, we have listened to feedback from across the aisle and propose, Mr. Speaker, to review the band to impact monthly income above 20,000 cedis and also at a rate of 30%. Mr. Speaker, we will bring the necessary changes to this august house to be legislated. Mr. Speaker, in view of the recent wage increases, wages around minimum wage levels have become partly taxable. In keeping with government commitment to lighten the tax burden of minimum wage earners at the lower levels of the wage ladder, minimum wage will attract no income tax.
Well, let's come back into the studio now and talk more on what we heard the minister talk about and more. Okay, now this government says it's committed to making sure those who evade tax pay their taxes. Yeah. Are you convinced that the way we are going about it is the right way?
Well, a number of things can be brought into being to be able to ensure that people pay their right amount of tax. I think government has outlined a number of measures. In my view, the taxpayer identification number, which is one of the key strategies government is employing, is a good tool. But how we deploy it, how we get people to get the taxpayer identification number has been my problem. Now, in the budget, again, one laudable thing government did was that now they are going to rely on third-party data. So you go to SNIT. There are a number of people on SNIT payroll who do not have taxpayer identification numbers. Now, SNIT has gone biometric, meaning that their system or their data is quite verifiable and you can rely on it. My question is, SNIT is an institution of state. Ghana Revenue Authority is an institution of state. What prevents them from collaborating, from picking data from SNIT and compare it to their data on the taxpayer identification number roll? And find out, those who have their data as SNIT, who are paying Social Security because they are workers and do not have taxpayer identification numbers, can't we generate it for them? Because the data is already available, and send them the thing via text message or email of any of that sort. We do not necessarily need people to walk up, complete forms in order to get a taxpayer identification number. When you talk about driving vehicle licensing authority, most people have driving licenses. Now, DVLA is also going biometric. So we can rely on some of these state institutions to gather the data for taxpayer identification number. When we were told that government GRA had hit a milestone of 1 million people on the tax-paying public registering for taxpayer identification number, I didn't think it was cause to celebrate. Why? Because those on Government of Ghana payroll are about 700,000 or 800,000. So it simply means that just about 200,000 in the private sector have applied. That is not a cause to rejoice, because the people who are supposed to pay taxes are way more than that. So again, I will commend government for the policy initiative by saying that now we are going to rely on third-party data. That is a commendable move.
Okay, so here's what the minority thinks. Their spokesperson on finance, Kesola Toforson, believes that government is doing all this because they have given they have set a revenue targets that are way beyond what we can achieve. And so there's so much burden on the GRA, and sometimes they've described it as a bit unrealistic, the way we are going about it. What, as a tax policy analyst, what's your take on that?
I don't think that the issue of raising revenue, we have hit the very farthest point as far as that's concerned. A lot of people in this country earn money who don't pay taxes on it, especially those in the informal sector. Now, by law, and this is nothing new, by law, everyone who has income that is not exempt from tax is supposed to pay. If you're in the informal sector, when you take the income tax regulations, there are categories of persons. So drivers, butchers, those in the marketplace, they all have an amount that has been given for them to pay every month or every quarter, under what we famously call the tax stamp. My question is, how far have we implemented that? So there's still a lot of room to go in order to raise revenue. What we need to be able to do is to find innovative ways to get the informal sector to pay taxes. So one suggestion I've always made is that in this era where everybody is almost using mobile money, why is it that people cannot still pay their taxes via mobile money? So you go to the market and the person is selling wares. Do you expect the person to leave selling the items and walk up to the GRA office to pay taxes? No, the person wouldn't do that. But if the person had a mobile money number the person could pay to and get a unique number to attach to it and get a receipt, the person can do that from the comfort of the market. So these are the things we need to be able to look at.
The reason many people will not do this is that there's no enforcement. And as is of human behavior, in many places, you would have to force people to do what is right. And this government believes that they need to look at that aspect. We heard the Deputy Finance Minister, Kweku Kwarteng, on the Super Morning Show today, and even mentioned by the Minister himself that they're going to enforce and begin to treat this as crime, tax evasion. It's already a crime, but they're going to start prosecuting people and going hard on them. Now, are we rushing things for ourselves as a people in terms of our desire to widen the tax net? Are we growing progressively? Let me ask that question, or we are rushing things?
I do not think we are rushing things. I think that we are taking baby steps. We need to double up. Why do I say this? Government introduced a 35% band in the mid-year review of the budget because they were not meeting revenue targets. What that simply means is that if 100 people are supposed to pay taxes and only 20 people are paying, you go back to the same 20 people and get them to pay more. What some people refer to as tax deepening. Those of us in the formal sector, we are those who are actually paying taxes. And we are being forced to pay more every single day. Whilst we always labor under the impression it's difficult to tax the informal sector. But I've always said that difficulty in itself does not mean impossibility. We have to take the baby steps.
And that's why I was asking if we are growing in a progressive manner, because the informal sector itself is not properly regulated. And so it's difficult to keep an eye on who's doing what at what time. And the minister did mention himself yesterday that data is a big problem. The vice president has mentioned it in times past. So why don't we try to fix the data problem? Then we can begin to look at focusing on the informal sector as a big portion or chunk of generating our revenue.
Okay. I don't think that one has to necessarily follow the other. We can work alongside it.
Okay.
Now, why I say that is that, as I said, the law requires that people pay certain amounts, maybe 40 Ghana cedis every 3 months, 50 Ghana cedis every 3 months. It's in the law. Now, if you walk up to the market people and tell them that, okay, we are supposed to pay taxes. Now, every 3 months, you are supposed to pay so much. In times past, the market queens, and even the law requires that the associations are supposed to collect it, and the leaders pay over to government. In times past, the excuse has been that the association leaders take it and they don't pay it over. And I said, now your problem has been solved because of mobile money. Let people pay by mobile money. Okay, so we can still go ahead and try and get what we call presumptive amounts, because the 40 Ghana cedis they are paying is not a true reflection of their income. It's just a notional amount. So they can continue to pay that whilst we try to formalize the economy and get their real income on which they pay, like you and I. And so we can work alongside it and then try to get people to pay their fair share. Other than that, the 30% you've seen this time around, the next time around there will be another band, because government needs revenue and is not able to get it because the people who are paying are already stretched thin. on that.
Well, the minister also spoke about private sector investment. Let's hear what he had to say about that.
Mr. Speaker, Ghana's credibility in the international capital market is on the rise. As a testament to the prudent fiscal and monetary policies of this government, in May 2018, the Akufo-Addo government successfully issued its first Eurobond with shining success. A hat trick of 3 L's we call in the industry. The largest Eurobond issuance in our country's history of $2 billion, the longest maturity period of 30 years, and the lowest pricing in Ghana's history, 8.627% for the 30-year bond. Mr. Speaker, 2018, Ghana's appeal as the preferred investment destination has grown significantly, and we have attracted global industry giants such as Volkswagen, Nissan, and Siemens to establish local assembly plants. Mr. Speaker, and Sinotrack. Mr. Speaker, our policies have improved the business environment, and the private sector has responded by increasing jobs. Based on SNIT data, the private sector added 208,624 more jobs in the first 10 months of 2018, an increase on the 197,000 former jobs registered in 2017. We have resourced Ghana Statistical Service and the Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations to develop a more robust system to track employment on a quarterly basis.
Well, tracking is the thing. Yeah. It's interesting as we talk about taxation and widening the tax net. I'll keep coming back to that question of whether we are taking the right steps at the right time. The country is growing. People appreciate that, but many people have been left behind in that regard. In terms of, like you mentioned, TIN. We talk about even the national identification card. All these things have been put in place to try to understand, well, the kind of people we have, those in the working class, those in the formal sector, those in the informal sector, and all that. Briefly, how do we make sure that as a nation we grow steadily, carrying along all the people that we need to carry in terms of getting data and even tracking what people do with the monies they have? I'm a journalist, but who knows what I do on the side?
That's a good point. And I've always maintained that the introduction of the taxpayer identification number, it's not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. Now, and I always say that there are two problems that come with taxation in countries like Ghana. The problem of identifying the taxpayer, and number two, the problem of tracking the person's income. So good policies on identification. What are we doing as far as tracking the income is concerned? And for me, I think that it's only when we go cashless as a nation, that is when we can be able to adequately track income. So for example, if you're doing something on the side and you are paid by cash, I always say cash is fungible. If a person gives me 100 Ghana cedis, there's no way of you telling he's giving me 100 Ghana cedis cash. If I spend it, there's no way of you tracking. But if the person sent it to me via mobile money, it leaves a trail. And so what I think government should do is that government should encourage people to be able to move away from using cash. How do you do that? It costs money to send money via mobile money. There are charges attached to it. There are times people go like, okay, the charges are just too much, I'll give you cash. Can government be bold enough to say, because we want to encourage it, let us find a way of absorbing that cost of using mobile money and other payment systems? Now, when MPP came to power, they did something which I think was commendable with the VAT on financial services. Now, that was an extra cost to consumers. So government abolished that aspect and said that now we want to reduce the cost of accessing financial services so that people can access it and then they stop using cash. Now, we need to go a step further because mobile money is very popular in Ghana. If you realize the number of amounts people have of mobile money, sometimes it's something else. Okay, so we need to be able to look at that. In other systems, even when you use cards, sometimes you are given a rebate on the amount you pay. These are things government could think through, that let us try and make cashless mobile systems or payment systems more attractive to people.
But what if someone sends me mobile money, or I receive a number of or I receive an amount of mobile money occasionally, and I say it's a gift. Why would you want to?
Well, yes, it's a gift. Now, even gifts are taxable.
Okay.
Now, the law requires that when you receive a gift, you pay tax of 15% on the value of the gift. So there's nothing that is really free. If it's a gift, you pay a low amount of tax, but anyway, you get to pay something. So I believe that we should take the two-pronged approach, identifying persons for tax purposes and tracking their income. That is when we are able to get enough money to be able to run and do all the social interventions government wants to do. So I think that by and large, I like the stance of government of not introducing new taxes and rather looking at existing laws and trying to enforce them. That is something we have always advocated from a policy standpoint, that whatever you are doing now should be at compliance and forget introducing new tax measures. I actually thought that some of the measures introduced in the media review of the budget should have been reviewed. Something like the luxury vehicle levy tax. I have a difficulty with calling the engine capacity of a vehicle a luxury vehicle. You could have a Mercedes-Benz 2018, which is a 1.8 liter vehicle, but you cannot tell me that is not a luxury vehicle. So we need to be able to think through the policies. If it's an environmental tax, that is not how you implement it. Why? Because you exempted commercial buses of 10 carrying 10 passengers and above. They are those who actually pollute the environment the more. So why exempt them? So we need to be able to sit around the policy table and think through the various policy options and try and realign them to make them realistic. Because my difficulty with the luxury vehicle levy is that whenever you create a system where people have to pay money in order to access services, they find ways around it. So the Goro boys will have a field day because now people will be going for roadworthy certificates which are not really genuine. Do we have enough police personnel to be able to monitor all the roadworthy certificates people have to find out whether it's genuine or not? These are the questions we need to ask ourselves.
Mr. Dumitia, let's now focus on wages and salaries because the minister was quite heavy on that. So expenditure on wages and salaries is forecasted at 19.4 billion cedis, representing about 26.5% of total expenditure. The wage bill is anticipated to reduce to 5.6% of GDP from the 5.9% projected outturn for 2018. In simple terms, what does this mean?
It means that we are still spending huge amounts of money of our revenue on what we call revenue expenditure, things that do not necessarily expand the economy. Now, what we need to be able to do is to be able to find a way of increasing our revenue so that a huge chunk of it does not go into paying wages and salaries.
And the government believes that's by widening the tax net.
Yes, I agree. Now, why I always say pro-poor policy should be adopted is that when government introduced the flat rate for NHIL and Get Fund, I was one of the people who advocated that government should be careful. Why? It potentially increases the price of goods and services. Now, pure water is going up per bag. You had the Association of Ghana Industries saying that if you look at the way the law is being implemented, it would increase the price of goods and services. You had mobile phone telecommunication companies saying that we are increasing our prices. Now, whenever the cost of living goes up, labor agitates for higher wages and salaries. So what you have done is that you have increased the tax to get more revenue, but you turn around and use the tax to pay wages and salaries. You've not done anything. So we need to be able to walk a fine path in raising revenue. The perfect way to do that is to increase income taxes and not consumption-based taxes on general goods and services. That's why I say I commend government for looking at ways of broadening the tax net by ensuring that everybody pays. But we've been singing the song for a long time. We need to be able to get results.
Thank you very much for your time this morning. William Owusu-Dimitia is a tax consultant and policy analyst. He's also with Lena Chia and Associates, and we've been discussing the budget. You're watching News Desk. We'll take a quick breather. When we come back, China has developed a virtual anchor, yes, to deliver the news. To stay.